Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all doing really well. So today I wanted to talk about some of my recent reads. So basically everything that I read in the month of August. And I did read a couple of really good books. I had one reread, I had one DNF, but all in all it was a pretty good month. So let's jump right into the reviews. So the first book that I read in August was The Folcroft Ghosts by Darcy Coates, and as you guys know, I'm a huge Darcy Coates fan. I love her writing and I love her haunted house stories, and I think as time goes on, her writing and her stories are just getting better and better and more complex and involved, and I really enjoy reading her books. So this one is actually one of her older books, and it's almost like a shadow of Darcy Coates, and not in a bad way. It's just, you can see glimmers of her writing, but it's one of her older ones, so she wasn't as developed in her storytelling. But overall I did enjoy it. So here we're following two young people, a brother and sister, who go to live with their grandparents on their mother's side. And they've actually never met their grandparents before, but their mom gets in a really horrific car accident, and she's actually in the hospital in a coma. And the two kids, the brother and sister, go to live with these grandparents who are super nice, but they live, of course, in the middle of nowhere. There's no cell reception, and the closest town is like, you know, say an hour's drive away. So really sweet old couple, and the grandmother is always cooking them meals and buying them gifts, and you know, they just want to sit down and play games with them and stuff like that. And but they're kind of out of their element, of course. They're modern kids and they want their cell phones and their toys and all of that kind of stuff. And of course, as time goes on, spooky things start to happen. So the house and the grounds is one thing that they start experiencing some stuff. And then the other thing, even when they're in town, they run into other people, other locals, who tell them that their grandparents are kind of spooky and they're not really loved people around those parts. So the kids start to uncover some mysteries, and you know, on goes the story. So like I said, I enjoyed this one. It was a 3-star read. It wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, and it's one of Darcy Coates' older books. So like I said, I could kind of see glimmers of her coming through the writing, but it was, you know, a little bit before some of her more modern ones that are done really well. So it was just when she was starting to spread her wings, and so it was still an enjoyable story, and I still liked it. And I would recommend you guys to pick it up too if you like her and her stories. It's super short. I think it was only about 200 and some odd pages, and I did enjoy it. I read it on my Kindle kind of each night before I went to bed, and you know, overall it was a pretty enjoyable story. And next up, I read Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So lately I've been looking at a lot of lists of like really popular classic Gothic horror books or Gothic books, and this one is always on there. It's on every single list I think I looked at. So it was available for free with my Audible subscription, so I downloaded it and gave it a listen. And I gotta say, this is definitely not my favorite book. You know, it was just okay for me. It definitely didn't have those Gothic spooky vibes that I thought it was going to, and I did know going into it that this was Jane Austen's sort of spoof of Gothic books that were really super popular, of course, when she was writing back in the day. But this one just didn't have a lot of the atmosphere that I was looking for. But at the same time, I do enjoy stuff like from the Regency period and romances and all of that kind of stuff, from, you know, period romances and that sort of thing. So I did enjoy that aspect of the book. And I can't remember the woman's name, but the older lady that the main character is kind of conversing with, it kind of reminds me of Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, when she's, you know, always gossiping and she never shuts up and all of that sort of thing. So it definitely made me chuckle. I did enjoy it. This was another 3-star read for me. I'm glad I picked it up because I do enjoy classics, but it didn't have kind of those Gothic feels that I was looking for. And you know, so it was what it was, but it wasn't a terrible book. And next up, oh my goodness. So I picked up, and I know this is going to be a controversial topic, but How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady, Hendrix. And this book is so polarizing. It came out earlier this year, I believe in January, and I personally really like Grady Hendrix's writing. My Best Friend's Exorcism, I'd say, would be within my top 20 books of all time. So I definitely wanted to pick this one up. I definitely wanted to read like, you know, a haunted house story that had to do with like dolls and puppets and all of that sort of thing, because you guys know that I love that subgenre of horror. And on Instagram and on Goodreads, I saw so many 5-star reviews of this book that I was super excited to finally get a chance to pick it up. And I did on audiobook as well. And this one didn't work for me, guys. It really didn't. I DNF'd it, I think about 12 chapters in, and not only did I not like it, it actually frustrated me and kind of pissed me off, and I had to put it down because I knew that it was going to drive me into a reading slump if I spent any more time with it. And funny enough, I'm not sure if it was on Instagram or on Goodreads, but a couple of other people had the same sort of thoughts that I did, and you know, they DNF'd it or gave it a low rating as well. So my beef with this book, and the reason why I put it down, was because I'm thinking when I'm 12 chapters into a book that we're going to start developing more story, and we're going to start getting into the horror or the spookiness of this haunted house. And honestly, for 12 chapters, it was this brother and sister bickering and fighting and conniving against each other and all of that kind of stuff. And that is one thing that I can't take in my books. I don't enjoy it. I don't find it entertaining at all. And I think it's because I have a lot of family drama myself in my own brood. And so I don't like it in my fiction, just with my own background and everything. So after 12 chapters of this brother and sister bickering and fighting after their parents die, I was just done with it, and it was getting way too dragged out. So I don't mind a little bit of that kind of thing in my books, but when you're, like I say, 12 chapters in and it's still going on, and it's, you know, they really kind of dislike each other, I just couldn't take it anymore. We didn't really get any horror in the whole first part of the book. And some people did say to me though, like, you know, towards the, like say a third or halfway into the book, once the horror hits, it's really good. And it probably is. Like I say, Grady Hendrix is a pretty good horror writer, and I did enjoy some of his other books, but for this one I just couldn't do it. And like I said, I didn't want to drive myself further into a reading slump, so I put this one down, and I don't think I'm going to pick up this one again. But let me know what you guys thought about this one down below. I know a lot of us in the horror community have already read it, so let me know what you guys thought. And my reread for this month was Paperback Crush, The Totally Radical History of 80s and 90s Teen Fiction by Gabrielle Moss. And I mean, I've talked about this book 100 times on the channel before. You guys know I absolutely love it. And the reason I picked this one up was because I was so frustrated with the Hendrix book that I wanted to read something that was comforting and was going to make me laugh. And, you know, I wanted to switch it up to a little bit of nonfiction as well. So I threw this one on for kind of the rest of the week after I DNF'd the Hendrix book, and listened to it on the way to and from work, and it was really enjoyable. So this is still a 5-star read for me. I still find it super enjoyable, and it does help me out with my own collecting, because of course I collect vintage girly books as well, and I love all of the memories that I get when they're talking about, you know, the Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley and R.L. Stine and all of those. So it just made me smile, and it was just one of those comfort things. It's like watching a comfort movie. This is definitely a comfort book for me. And next up, I read The Old Willis Placement by Mary Downing Hahn, and this is one of her more recent books, I believe. When I looked it up, I think it came out in about 2004. So this is about a young boy and girl, and they live kind of in an older place, and in a house just down the way, a young girl and her father move in. And this boy and girl, who are brother and sister, they have a lot of rules around their upbringing, and very strict upbringing, and they're not supposed to have interactions with other kids. And the sister especially, she really wants to interact with this young girl. She wants to have a friend. She is really drawn to her, and so she starts breaking some of the rules. And the story is told kind of with 2 points of view at some aspects, and then other aspects, those points of view kind of come together. So when we have the split POVs, We have, you know, the young girl who's really, really strict, but she wants to have a friend. We're hearing things from her perspective. And one thing that I really liked about this book, when we hear about the perspective of the other girl, we're actually reading it as part of a journal entry. And I really liked that. It really reminded me of the book Thornhill by Pam Smythe, where we get information from other points of view through journals. And I really, really liked that aspect. I thought it was, you know, it was cute and it's spooky. It's a middle grade book, so you know, it definitely had all of those comfy, cozy, cute and spooky feels. So I really enjoyed it. The only thing that really made me bring my star rating down to about a 3 was that on several occasions, these two young brother and sister, like when they come out of the woods, they're kind of dirty and their hair is all messy and tangled and everything. And I believe the young boy has like feathers in his hair and stuff. And they're on numerous occasions referred to as, oh, you look like you're a pure savage, like you look like you're savages. And I think for a book that's written in 2004, it should have been well past using that kind of language. And, you know, if it had happened once, it would be one kind of thing, but I think it was like 2 or 3 times that it had happened in the book. And for me, like, that kind of language just shouldn't be used, you know, for, a modern, something that was written in the past 20 years. You kind of expect it, like I read a lot of vintage books, and you kind of half expect it when you're in the 80s and 90s that it has really problematic language. But I was really surprised to see it in this one, and it really did kind of, you know, put a bad taste in my mouth. But other than that, the story itself is super cute. It's spooky. It's a haunting kind of story, and I really liked how the ending came about, and it was actually kind of super emotional at the end. So I really did enjoy it. Just that one little aspect maybe bring my star rating down. And the last book that I read this month was The House of Whispers by Laura Purcell. And I'm not going to give too much viewpoint on this book because I am doing a completely separate review video for this one. But if you don't know anything about this book, I will give you a quick synopsis. So this was a 3-star read for me, and here we're following sort of 3 timelines. So the first timeline, we're following a maid. Her name is Hester Y, and she starts in a new position, a new employment for this older lady, and she lives in this sprawling mansion on the seaside, and Mrs. Pinecroft is her name, and she is very spooky herself. Her household is spooky, the other maids are spooky, and there is one particular helper, housekeeper, companion. Her name is Grady, and she is super spooky as well. So as Hester comes on and starts learning things about the house and the family and all of this, it gets darker and spookier as time goes on. So that's one timeline, and then the second timeline is when we're following Hester when she's younger and she's actually in somebody else's employment. And so we're starting to learn a little bit about her backstory, why she is the way she is, and dark things, secrets, if you will, that are coming up, you know, about Hester's past. And then the third timeline, we're actually following Mrs. Pinecroft, so Louise Pinecroft and Grady, when they're younger, when they're, you know, say a teenage age, and they're living in the same mansion, which used to belong to Louise's father. He was a really prominent doctor, and he dealt with a lot of people who had consumption, which back in the day, of course, if you brought people into like fresh air, they thought it was going to cure them of consumption. So he thought that, you know, fresh sea air will be perfect for these people. So we follow these 3 timelines, and it is a very gothic, atmospheric sort of book. It's very reminiscent, especially the timeline with Hester and Mrs. Pinecroft. It's very reminiscent to me of like Rebecca or books like that. So it definitely does have all of the spooky atmospheric feels. There were things that I liked about the book, and there were things that I didn't like about the book, which I'm going to go into in that individual review, which is going to be coming up on the channel. So like I said, this one was about a 3-star read for me as well. So all in all, like the entire month was pretty much 3-star reads, except for my one reread that I purposely did because of the DNF. But you know, 3 stars is pretty good. It was a pretty satisfying month. I was glad to have read the books that I did. And as always, if you guys have read any of these, let me know down below what you thought about them. But until next time, stay spooky, everybody. Bye. Bye.